The gavel came down, and the sentence which followed shook the courtroom to its foundations. Kody Brown, you are hereby sentenced to 22 years in prison. For a man who had once paced across television screens, bigger than life, unassailable, and always mastering his destiny, it was the ultimate descent from grace. Gasps sounded through the gallery, reporters wrote furiously, and the internet erupted in seconds. But this is the thing that no one saw coming. This moment was not just about the sentence. It was about the woman standing opposite him. Meri Brown, finding her voice and bringing down the man who'd kept her silenced all these years. This was not a typical courtroom confrontation. This was the culmination of a decades-long saga with betrayal, secrets, and power battles. And the conclusion? It was more sensational than any episode of reality TV ever produced. For years, the globe had watched and witnessed on Sister Wives the intricately choreographed image of a polygamous clan attempting to exist in harmony. It all centered around Kody Brown, charming, domineering, and always positioning himself as the sage patriarch who kept it all together. But off camera, off mic, cracks were beginning to form. Rumors of favoritism of one wife, financial mismanagement, and manipulation ran subtly among the fans. But the deepest wound? The shattered relationship between Kody and Meri. Meri, the first wife, loyal and optimistic, had been pushed aside, disregarded, and spoken to as if her voice wasn't even heard. While Kody thrived in the spotlight, Meri was left in the shadows until she started pulling those shadows apart. At first, Meri stayed silent. She endured. She tried to hold the family together, even as Kody drifted further away. But what viewers didn't know was that Meri wasn't just sitting back. She was documenting, collecting, and quietly building a case that one day would shake Kody's entire empire. The breakdown occurred when the financial reports started coming up to the surface. Secret property transactions, bank accounts nobody was aware of, money diverted in secrecy. For Meri, it was the evidence she needed. For prosecutors, it was the clincher. The same man who preached unity, honesty, and faith was behind lies. And Meri? She had secrets to share. The courtroom was full to capacity the day of Kody's sentencing. Fans, reporters, former followers, they were all in attendance. The atmosphere was charged, the air so thick with anticipation, you could almost hear everyone's heart pounding. Kody entered in a suit, but not his customary swagger. He still attempted to flash his confident smirk, the same one he flashed on the TV when he thought he could script the scene. But this was not TLC, and there were no cameras he could win over with a charm these days. And then there was Meri. She wasn't the quiet, tearful woman viewers remembered. She walked in with her head high, her shoulders straight, and a stack of papers in her hand that would shatter the last of Kody's defenses. When the judge allowed her to speak, the room froze. Meri's voice trembled at first. But then it grew strong, unshakable. You took years taking my voice away from me, dictating the story, making me feel tiny. Today I'm standing here, not as your wife, not as your victim, but as the person who will finally tell the truth. There was silence. Even Kody's lawyers shifted in their seats uncomfortably. Meri set out detail after detail. His deceptions, his manipulation, his betrayal not only of her, but of the entire family. And then came the bombshell. Secret financial documents that even Kody's own attorneys had never seen. Documents that substantiated once and for all he was hiding money, manipulating assets, and lying to everyone around him. It was the moment that sealed his destiny. The judge slanted forward, shaken by the evidence and the testimony. His words were strong, authoritative, and indelible. Kody Brown, your conduct has demonstrated a gross disregard for responsibility, trust, and the individuals who trusted in you. For that, this court finds you guilty and sentences you to 22 years behind bars. The courtroom exploded. Some gasped, some whispered, some even quietly cheered under their breath. Kody turned white. The once dominant patriarch was small, powerless, and defeated. His hands shook as officers advanced to handcuff him. For the first time in years, Kody was without control, without excuse, without an audience waiting to believe his tale. The cameras did not miss a moment, as he was taken away. A man who'd made his life based on dominance and authority now without it all. And Meri? She didn't gloat, she didn't smile, she just stood there. Tears in her eyes, not tears of sadness, but tears of release. For her, this wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. Outside the courthouse, the world held its breath. Reporters were everywhere, microphones pushed forward, cameras blindingly bright. Everyone wanted to know what Meri would say. Her words were simple but powerful. This isn't about revenge. It's about truth. And today truth won. Within hours, social media exploded. Hashtags like #MeriDestroys, Kody sentenced, #Justice for Meri trended worldwide. Fans who had watched her suffer on screen for years celebrated her strength and resilience. Memes, reaction videos, and live streams flooded the internet. But greater than that, Meri was a symbol of rising up after decades of quietness, a symbol of escaping oppression, a symbol of what occurs when the truth is finally revealed. At the same time, Kody started fresh life in prison. No cameras, no crowd, no wives to be managed. Only a man paying the price for decades of arrogance and deception. For millions of viewers, this wasn't another reality TV breaking news. It was the end of an era. The man who once constructed a family empire, who once demanded attention, now became a warning. And Meri? She emerged from the courthouse not a victim, not Kody's wife, but the woman who upended it all. Her tale went from mere tabloid fodder. It became a tale of resilience, of justice, and of taking back power. Meri will never be forgotten. Standing tall in that courtroom, Kody handcuffed and the booming sound of the gavel like thunder. This wasn't just the end of sister wives. This was the conclusion no one ever imagined they'd witness. And it was Meri who brought it. The courtroom was so silent you could hear the soft whir of the air conditioning overhead. Every available seat filled, every nook and cranny jammed with spectators, note-taking reporters, camera crews poised to record history, and fans who'd watched this family's drama unfold for more than a decade. The air was thick with tension. Everyone was certain that today would be the day, but none were ready for how abrupt the result would be. And then, bang! The judge's gavel descended with a crack so abrupt it appeared to rattle the walls. Instantly, time stood still. Eyes snapped to the bench, held their breaths, hearts pounding. The words that issued afterward were like a bolt of lightning. Kody Brown, this court hereby sentences you to 22 years in prison. The gallery exploded. Gasps, whispers, the stifled sob of someone weeping. It all commingled into a tempest of shock. Reporters rushed to type out the quote, fingers flying across keyboards as if they couldn't type quickly enough to record history in the moment. But the most intense response wasn't from the crowd. It was from Kody himself. He slumped at the defense table, shoulders rigid, face pale, eyes fixed on the judge in shock. This was not the cocky man that had appeared on television. This was not the boisterous, authoritative voice who once bragged about ruling his family like a kingdom. This was a man reduced to nothing, compelled to face the one thing he never thought would come to pass: responsibility. For years, Kody had believed himself to be untouchable. Cameras had trailed behind him. Fans had argued with him. Critics had assailed him. But in the end, he always remained, still master of his own tale. But this time, there were no producers to end the scene. No editors to manipulate the story. This was real. This was final. This was the destruction of Kody Brown. And at the heart of it all was Meri. She did not sit silently in the shadows this time. No longer the invisible, neglected wife. This day, she was the one with power. And as the sentence from the judge rang out through the courtroom, each camera in the room snapped its way to her face. Her eyes were fixed upon Kody, firm and unwavering. She did not smile. She did not gloat. But the power in her face said it all. She had triumphed. It was less than a courtroom, and more like the finale of a soap opera series. Millions, after all, had spent years watching this family on their televisions, living with them, experiencing their struggles, their victories, and their failures. Audiences had put time, feeling, and sometimes even fury into this epic. But what was happening now was bigger than anything that television could have written. Court officers lined the walls, their faces tense and watchful. Blinking cameras from the press pool strobed the room with white flashes. Fans in the back row gripped one another's hands, their mouths moving in shocked whispers. And at the center of it all, seated, was Kody, the man who had once boasted he was larger than life, his face now smaller than anyone's. You could almost sense the momentum change in the air, as reality began to sink in. When words from the judge first hit, Kody blinked frantically as if attempting to frame them. He hunched forward, lips opening a fraction as if he wished to object, to argue, to fight back. But nothing was forthcoming. His attorney leaned in close, mumbling something into his ear, but Kody's expression remained vacant, almost immobile. It was the expression of a man who finally understood that the grip he held for decades was broken. For years Kody had gotten away with spinning tales. On Sister Wives he scripted the way he appeared, the way he sounded, the way his tale was being shared. Even when there were scandals, even when there was criticism from fans, he could always rely on his charm, his power, and his skill at dodging fault. But here, in this courtroom, none of that had mattered. The gavel had been louder than his words. The proof had been greater than his charisma. And Meri, his first wife, the woman he had discarded, had been greater than his pride. Every camera focused on her. Meri, who had for so long been seen to be the quiet, heartbroken wife, now sat tall and unshaking. Her presence dominated the room in a way it had never done previously. She didn't have to utter a word at that time. The testimony she had already given during the trial spoke on her behalf. Her own testimony was pointed, brazen, and brutal. She had called out Kody, in a manner no other woman had ever mustered up the courage to do so, exposing years of lies, manipulation, and betrayal. And now, as the verdict was read, she remained steadfast, sitting there unruffled, unflinching. The balance of power had been reversed entirely. The man who had ruled her life for so long was impotent. And she, after all those years of mute forbearance, had retrieved her voice and her honor. It was the type of justice that had been waited for by fans for years. And now it was happening live before their very eyes. The crowd in the courtroom weren't spectators. They were witnesses to the downfall of a man who once said he was untouchable. Some gasped in horror. Others were muttering to one another, their voices riddled with excitement or shock. Some even wept, overcome with emotion. Journalists made a beeline for the exit the moment the judge concluded speaking, racing to get the scoop before the rest of them. Phones rang and blipped as news organizations around the nation flashed with breaking news. Sister Wives patriarch receives 22-year sentence. Kody Brown's fall from grace leaves fans aghast around the globe. Meri delivers knockout punch in courtroom finale. Outside the courthouse, onlookers and protesters gathered, jostling to catch reports. In a matter of minutes, social media erupted. Twitter streams, TikTok live, YouTube broadcasts, all replete with reactions, commentary, and shock. But not inside. Inside there was no joy, no anger. Inside the truth could not be denied. The patriarch had departed. The gavel had ruled and the narrative had been irreversibly altered. It wasn't merely a matter of years Kody was being sent away for. It was a matter of what the sentence meant. For Meri, it meant closure after decades of suffering and silence. To the other wives, it meant a warning that control and manipulation only go so far. For fans, it was the justice they had long hoped to see. And for Kody, the indisputable fact that regardless of how large your audience, regardless of how much you believe you are a force to be reckoned with, lies always topple like a house of cards. As the officers moved in to cuff Kody, the cameras closed in. The once arrogant patriarch's hands shook as icy metal wrapped around his wrists. The click of the cuffs closing was cacophonous in its symbolism. The end of his dynasty. Kody glared up one final time, his gaze sweeping across the room. Perhaps he was searching for pity. Perhaps he was searching for someone to speak up for him. But all he saw were unforgiving glares, scratching pens, and the unflinching gaze of Meri, returning his stare, no longer as his wife, no longer as his victim, but as the woman who brought him down. And that, more than the gavel bang, more than the sentence itself, more than the murmurs of the crowd, was the moment when the world was told, Kody Brown's tale was at an end. To the world outside, Sister Wives was another reality show. Cameras were rolling, families laughed, arguments unfolded for the sake of entertainment, and fans online argued back and forth about who was wrong and who was right. But to the individuals within that family, it wasn't a TV show, it was real life. And to Meri Brown, it was life with cracks that widened and became more hazardous by the year. The outside world got to see the spiffed up version. Kody Brown, the avowed patriarch ruling over his wives and kids with assurance, ever poised to let everyone know that he had made decisions for the benefit of the family. He was the man who had it all put together. A leader, a husband, a father. But off stage, off camera, the real story was much darker. It was one of control, manipulation, favoritism, and secrets. And it was those very secrets that would someday pull Kody into a courtroom he could never leave. It began quietly. The viewers picked up on it first. Kody playing favorites with his wives. His affection decidedly one-sided. He seemed more interested in Robyn, while Meri slipped into the background. Initially, Meri blamed herself. Perhaps she wasn't trying hard enough. Perhaps she wasn't worthy of love anymore. But with time she understood it wasn't about her. It was about Kody's increasing need for control and approval. The little things piled up. Kody would dismiss her opinions, roll his eyes at her suggestions, and belittle her in front of the others. He made decisions without her input, constantly reminding her that he was the one in charge. Slowly but surely, Meri's voice was silenced up behind closed doors. The control was worse. Financial matters, Kody controlled them. Family decisions, Kody made them. Even personal freedom, Kody set the limits. Meri, who had once dreamed of having a large family, was now alone, not only with her husband, but with the rest of them as well. Kody's preferential treatment fostered dividing lines, and Meri alone bore the burden of aloneness. But what Kody did not realize was that loneliness will not necessarily make a person weaker. Sometimes it will make him stronger. It will provide him with time to realize the truth. And for Meri, it provided her with time to begin observing things Kody believed no one ever would. To begin with, the revelations were little. Strange financial statements, discrepancies in bank accounts, mysterious withdrawals. However, the more Meri investigated, the more she understood that this wasn't merely mishandling. This was fraud. Kody had been secretly stashing money, properties bought in other names, accounts hidden where nobody could find them, transactions done in secret. For a man who liked to lecture others on family cohesion and openness, the hypocrisy was breathtaking. And it wasn't only finances. And Shibi Tirpita's tashing money, there were emotional transgressions as well. Kody's overt favoritism towards Robyn wasn't only hurtful, it was degrading. Meri wasn't only shunted aside, she was erased. While he focused the camera on one wife, Meri remained invisible, her years of sacrifice and loyalty obliterated as if they never mattered. At first, Meri bore the secret of that hurt for years. Outside, she smiled in front of the cameras. She played the role of faithful wife, walking the thin line to avoid rocking the boat. But in her heart, she was shattering. There were nights she cried by herself, wondering how her world had gotten this way. There were days she longed to scream in front of the cameras, tell the world what was actually going on. But instead, she suffered. Because deep inside she knew something Kody did not. She knew the truth tends to have a way of revealing itself. And when it did, she would be prepared. Meri started keeping everything documented over time. Financial statements, phone conversations, agreements, records of conversations. She had no idea exactly how everything would go down, but she knew she had to have proof. Proof of the manipulation that had been going on for all those years. Proof of the betrayal. Proof of the lies. And gradually, that evidence mounted. Bit by bit, it created a portrait of a man who wasn't merely failing as a husband, but a man who had been lying to all the people around him, his wives, his children, and even his public. By the time prosecutors knocked on their doors, Meri had airtight proof. They weren't just gazing upon a man who had failed in marriage, they were staring at a man who had created an empire of lies. The last straw arrived in a second. When Meri never could forget, Kody had a family meeting one evening and gazed her directly in the eyes and said words that were more cutting than any previous betrayal. "You're not important to this family anymore." It wasn't said in anger. It wasn't shouted. It was cold, deliberate, and dismissive. To him, it was just another way of reminding her she had no power. But to Meri, it was the moment the scales fell from her eyes completely. She realized then that the man she had once trusted, once loved, once followed, was gone. All that was remaining was arrogance, greed, and control. And that understanding set a flame within her that could never be extinguished. What made the betrayal hurt so much was the dichotomy between Kody's public persona and his private behavior. On television, he preached about unity, family, and faith. He was the misunderstood husband who was just doing the best that he could. But in real life, he was leading a dual existence. While his fans questioned whether he was a good leader or not, Meri understood the reality. He wasn't leading, he was manipulating. He wasn't guarding his family, he was guarding himself. And that's what made Meri's eventual decision so powerful. She wasn't just standing up for herself. She was standing up for everyone who had ever been deceived by the polished image Kody had created. By the time the courtroom showdown arrived, the years of betrayal had built into an unstoppable storm. Meri's evidence, her testimony, and her courage weren't born overnight. They were the product of years of pain, silence, and resilience. Each betrayal, each insult, each secret account, it was all brought crashing to earth in that courtroom. Kody wasn't merely being sentenced for paper crimes, he was being sentenced by the force of his own actions, the years of harm he had done, and the reality that could no longer be denied. And the most poetic of them all, the woman he himself had termed as unimportant, was the one to bring him down. Why this tale unsettled fans so much wasn't because of the sentence. It was because of the betrayal that sat at its center. Betrayal cuts deeper than defeat. Betrayal sticks longer than errors. Betrayal doesn't simply wound, it redefines you. For Meri, all those years of betrayal could have shattered her to pieces. They could have embittered her, enraged her, and defeated her. But instead, they hardened her like steel. By the time she entered that courtroom, she wasn't that quiet, forgotten wife anymore. She was the storm. As Section 2 of this story comes to a close, one thing becomes obvious. Kody's fall wasn't sudden. It wasn't unexpected. It wasn't even surprising. It was years in the making, the culmination of arrogance, greed, and betrayal. And Meri, she wasn't an innocent bystander. She was the architect of his downfall. What had begun as fissures in their union had expanded into splits so broad that no one could help but notice. And when those splits finally collapsed, the whole empire fell. The courthouse was abuzz well before the hearing even started. Reporters stood along the steps outside, microphones at the ready, poised to capture the moment. Sister Wives fans who had followed every curve and twist of the Brown family's drama stood in groups, phones held high, live streaming to their fans. Inside, the energy was no different. The air was thick with expectation, the sort that hardens in your chest. Every spot in the gallery was filled. Rows of relatives, court aides, curious bystanders, and reporters hung forward, gazes fixed on the vacant defense seat where Kody Brown was about to take his seat. They all knew this wasn't going to be another sentencing hearing. This was the denouement to a multi-year tale of deception, betrayal, and heartache. And when the doors behind the courtroom creaked open, everyone looked. A dark-suited Kody Brown marched in. He attempted to don the same bravado the fans had witnessed for so many years at first glance, chin lifted, hair meticulously groomed, eyes flashing toward the cameras with the same blend of arrogance and charm. But if you glanced harder, you could glimpse the fissures. His jaw was clenched. His smile was tight. His hands quaked a touch as he fiddled with his tie. It wasn't the self-assured patriarch of the TLC reality show. It was a guy desperately attempting to hold on to an image that had already fallen apart. He took his seat at the defense table and refused to make eye contact with the gallery. For a brief moment, he glanced toward Meri, who sat across the room with her lawyers. Her presence was steady, unwavering. Their eyes met for only a second, but that second spoke volumes. The man who once dismissed her now faced her as his greatest adversary. The proceedings began with the prosecution laying out their evidence: financial records, property transactions, testimonies from former associates. It was bad enough, but the atmosphere in the room changed when the judge asked Meri to make her statement. She rose slowly, making her way across the courtroom to the witness stand with a quiet dignity that made her inner turmoil incongruous. Cameras panned in, pens scribbled on notepads. The world waited with bated breath. Initially, her voice was barely above a whisper, but as she began to speak, strength infused every word. Kody, years and years you have told me I didn't count. You told me my voice wasn't worth anything. You belittled me, you humiliated me, and tried to erase me. But today my voice is heard. Not just for me, but for all the people you hurt with your deceptions. The room was hushed, the sort of silence that's palpable, like pressure pressing against your chest. Even the judge leaned forward, looking serious. Meri didn't talk about emotions alone. She'd brought cold, hard evidence with her. She waved documents in the air: secret bank accounts, covert property transactions, and contracts Kody'd stashed away for years. These, she stated bluntly, are the things you never wanted anyone to know. You spoke of family, yet you constructed a kingdom for yourself. You spoke of honesty, yet you lived in dishonesty. Gasps moved through the gallery. Even Kody's own lawyers were stunned. They hushed among themselves with fury, leafing through their files as though looking for an explanation. But there was not one. Kody's face reddened. His lips were pressed tightly together, his eyes glinting at Meri as if he could stop her cold with a look. But she didn't waver. For the first time in decades, she wasn't intimidated by him. Then came the worst of it all, the most destructive part of her testimony. Not the bank records, but the personal truths. She told of lonely nights, of sobbing herself to sleep as Kody spent his evenings elsewhere. She told of being belittled, of being told in so many words that she no longer counted to him. And then, her voice cracking, she went on, "You stole years from me, years I can never get back. But today, I take back my power. Today you can't dismiss me. Today, the truth is louder than your voice." Some in the audience dried tears from their cheeks. Others bobbed up and down in agreement. It was not just testimony. It was catharsis. It was Meri letting loose 30 years of hurt on the world. When Kody's turn arrived, the room drew tense again. He straightened up, his voice growing with the same bluster he had habituated on television. "This is a witch hunt," he barked. "I've given everything to this family. I've sacrificed more than anyone knows. And now I'm being punished for being the only one willing to lead." But the words fell flat. There was no cheering audience, no reality show editing to spin his narrative. The judge looked unimpressed. The jury remained unmoved. Even the gallery shifted uncomfortably as his tirade dragged on. And then, Meri's lawyer calmly handed over the stack of documents she had presented earlier. The judge flipped through them, his expression darkening with every page. Kody's voice faltered, his bravado cracked. For once his words weren't enough. The turning point came when the prosecutor addressed the court. Mr. Brown constructed a career on deceptions. Deceptions to his family, deceptions to his constituents, and deceptions to the system. But because of the bravery of one woman, the truth has come out. This is not only about fiscal abuse. This is about accountability. And today, accountability will be served. Everyone stared at Meri. She sat quiet, hands clasped, face serene. She didn't need to gloat. She didn't need to say anything more. Her job was accomplished. At last, the judge did speak. His voice was firm, but there was no doubt about the heaviness in his voice. "Mr. Brown, this court has heard sufficient. The testimony we have heard today shows a scheme of lies and misrepresentation that cannot be denied. You have violated the faith of your family, your community, and those who trusted you. And now, you will pay the price." Kody swallowed hard, his gaze shifting nervously around the courtroom. But the judge was not done. "This court hereby sentences you to 22 years in prison." The gavel's thump on wood was thunder. The audience exploded. Gasps, whispers, even soft cheers from people who waited years for this day. Reporters ran for the doors, ready to blast it out into the world. Kody dropped back into his chair, his face pale. His hands were trembling as officers advanced. He was not in control for the first time in his life. And Meri, she kept her calm, her gaze focused on Kody, not with contempt, but with soft ferocity. She no longer needed anger. Justice had been done. What went down in that courtroom was more than a legal verdict. It was symbolic. It was the fall of a man who had spent years silencing others, who finally silenced himself. It was the victory of a woman who had been ignored, dismissed, and humiliated, who finally stood tall. And it was the moment when fans everywhere understood. This wasn't about entertainment. This was justice. This was history. The courtroom was already charged after hours of testimony, evidence, and emotional disclosure. But when the judge leaned forward, ready to hand down his ultimate verdict, you could literally feel the air grow heavy. Every noise, the rustle of papers, the snap of a pen, the groan of wood on a bench, seemed amplified, reverberating through the chamber, like a countdown to something unavoidable. This was it, the moment the world had waited for. For a few excruciating seconds, the judge just sat there, looking at Kody Brown. Nobody uttered a word. The silence hung in the air so keenly that it seemed capable of cutting across the room. Even the cameras, though quiet, seemed to move in closer, eager to catch the precise moment when Kody's destiny was decided. Kody adjusted in his seat, attempting to look calm, but his leg bounced involuntarily under the table. His formerly confident demeanor had devolved into a small fidgety thing. The swaggering reality TV patriarch was nowhere to be found. In his stead sat a man on the brink of destruction. Meri, a few rows back, didn't blink. Her eyes stayed on the judge, her face still but firm. For her, this was more than about punishment. It was about closure. At last, the judge cleared his throat and spoke in deep, measured tones. "Mr. Brown," he started, "the court has considered all evidence, heard all testimonies, and listened intently to the voices of those you wounded. It is obvious that your actions were not errors. They were decisions, calculated decisions that inflicted suffering, economic harm, and betrayal on a scale this court cannot disregard." A shiver ran through the gallery. Some gasped, others nodded gravely. The judge went on. "You came forward as a leader, as a man of faith and family, but in private you abused trust, manipulated those around you, and constructed an empire of deceptions. You did not act out of ignorance. You acted with purpose, and purpose requires responsibility." Kody's eyes widened. He shook his head ever so slightly, mouthing something to his lawyer, but the judge did not stop. His words echoed with finality. Before the sentence was actually delivered, the judge offered Kody one last opportunity to say something. His lawyer whispered frantically, telling him to remain calm, but Kody couldn't help himself. He stood up, smoothing his suit jacket, his voice rising with that old standby bravado. "This is wrong," he bellowed. "Everything you've heard here today has been turned on me. I built a family. I built a life. And now, because one angry woman craves vengeance, I'm being dismantled. I won't stand for this. I'm not a criminal. I'm a provider." The gallery boiled up with murmurs. Reporters wrote frantically, capturing every phrase. But the judge's expression was stone. And then, Meri rose. The judge permitted her to speak. Her voice, steady and even, sliced through Kody's rant like a knife. "You're not being punished because of me, Kody. You're being punished because of the truth. The truth you thought you could bury forever." The room grew silent once more. Kody stood stock still, his fists balled at his sides. For once, he had no retort. The judge raised the gavel, his voice heavy with finality. "Mr. Brown, the court does hereby find you guilty. You are now sentenced to 22 years in federal prison." The gavel came down. The sound was blinding, resounding through the courtroom, like thunder crackling over a field of battle. Gasps swirled up from the gallery. Some mouths were covered in horror. Some people whispered. Cameras popped, freezing the instant Kody's face went white. His body appeared to fold in on itself. His knees slightly buckled as he slumped back in his chair, his eyes blankly staring forward. For once, the man who never had anything to say was quiet. Responses within the courtroom were fierce. Journalists rushed for the doors, yelling into phones. 22 years, Kody Brown sentenced to 22 years. Gallery fans swapped glances of shocked relief. A few of them even quietly clapped before court officers quietened them. Others shook their heads incredulously, muttering, "It finally happened, he's really going to prison." Meri shut her eyes, breathing deeply. One tear rolled down her face, not because she was sad, but because it was freedom. It was the closure of a chapter she had been lugging around for too long. As guards approached, Kody suddenly came out of his trance. He leapt into the air, striking his hands on the defense table. "This isn't justice," he bellowed. "This is a sting. You can't do this to me." His voice cracked with desperation, no longer commanding but pitiful. The guards placed firm hands on his shoulders, forcing him back down. His attorney tried to calm him, whispering, "Sit down, Kody, please." But Kody thrashed, his voice echoing through the chamber. "I'm the victim here. I'm the one who gave everything. You're ruining my life." The judge struck the gavel again, demanding order, but the breakdown only served to make everyone realize what they already knew: Kody Brown was done. All the while, Meri remained seated, observing with quiet strength. She didn't sneer. She didn't taunt. She just gave herself the pleasure of knowing justice had heralded louder than any of Kody's words ever could. He had been silenced, diminished, and rejected for so many years. And yet now, it was she who had uncovered the truth. Silence was stronger than words. And the cameras recorded it all. The once dismissed woman now standing as the face of justice. Outside, in the world's view, 22 years was merely a number. Inside that courtroom, however, it was more. It represented each year Kody had manipulated, each year he betrayed, each year he dismissed the people who trusted him the most. Every year of his sentence reminded him that lies have consequences. And Meri, and millions watching worldwide, felt the force of that symbolism. This wasn't merely punishment. It was a reckoning. When guards finally led Kody out of the courtroom, the gallery sat in stunned silence. His once proud gait was gone. His head dropped, his wrists cuffed in steel that shone under the fluorescent lights. Cameras blazed wildly, snapping every footfall. The one who had previously dominated the story now stood as a shamed man in shackles. As he passed Meri, their eyes met one final time. Kody's gaze was filled with anger, bitterness, and desperation. But Meri's was steady, calm, almost peaceful. She didn't need revenge. She had justice. Outside the courthouse, chaos reigned. News vans lined the street. Anchors shouted breaking updates into cameras. Fans held signs, some cheering for Meri, others still in disbelief about Kody's fall. The phrase "Kody Brown sentenced" began trending instantly across social media platforms. Clips of Meri's testimony, the gavel strike, and Kody's meltdown spread like wildfire, drawing millions of views within hours. Hashtags like #JusticeForMeri, #Kody Brown sentenced, and #Courtroom finale dominated the internet. It wasn't just news. It was history in the making. When Meri finally stepped outside, reporters swarmed her, microphones thrust forward. Everyone wanted her reaction, her headline, her soundbite. But she did not make a long speech. She just spoke. "This isn't about me, this is about truth. And the truth has finally spoken." And then she turned, descended the steps of the courthouse, and was lost in the throng. The sentencing of Kody Brown was not merely a drama in a courtroom. It was public breakdown for a man who had constructed his entire life around dominating others. It was victory for a woman who had been pushed aside for too long. And it was a lesson flashed across the screens of millions. Power founded on falsehood will always collapse. For Sister Wives fans, it was bizarre. For Meri, it was justice. And for Kody, it was the start of 22 long years in prison. The gavel came down, and with it, Kody Brown's world fell apart. But the tale did not conclude in the courtroom. In a sense, it was merely the start. What ensued was a maelstrom of reactions, feelings, and repercussions that would echo far beyond that four-walled space. The Brown family drama had been public for so long, acted out on TV screens for years. But now it had spilled out into the world, where the cameras no longer dictated the course of events. As Kody was led out of the courthouse by guards, The once proud patriarch resembled a shadow of his former self. His hair was mussed, his complexion pale, his once defiant glare softened by empty desperation. The jingle of handcuffs sounded with every step. For the first time in decades, Kody wasn't ringed by wives or cameras to insulate his ego. He was single, accompanied only by officers who treated him not like a celebrity but like an inmate. He was loaded into a transport van. The slamming of the doors behind him a finality that echoed like a coffin lid shutting. His life as he had known it was from that point on over. Outside, the world hummed. Inside the Brown household, the repercussions were far more fervent. Meri sat in silence with her lawyers, her hands crossed in her lap. She had been the one to set the truth free, yet she didn't feel the victory dance, the smug self-satisfaction. She felt something more profound, a relief. For so long, she had borne the weight of being ignored, belittled and dismissed. Now, she had found her voice again. She spoke in a barely audible whisper to her lawyer. "It's over now." Finally, Christine, who had long since separated from Kody, was observing the sentencing from a distance. She clutched her phone to her ear, sobbing. "He thought he was above everyone," she explained to a friend. But now the truth caught up. For Christine, the moment wasn't about revenge. It was about closure. Janelle, being practical as ever, issued a short statement: "Justice was served today. My focus continues to be about protecting my children and moving forward in integrity." She spoke calmly, but beneath it was relief. Robyn, on the other hand, was crushed. Devoted to Kody until the end, she wailed uncontrollably as cameras recorded her exiting the courthouse. To everyone else, it appeared to be denial. To those who knew her, it was breaking her heart. She had held onto the picture of Kody as a leader and provider. But now, that picture had been broken irreparably. Maybe most influential were the Brown children, several of whom had grown up under the shadow of their father's control. Others were bitter. One adult child wrote on the internet, "For years we couldn't question him. We were told to follow orders. He now at last, the truth is out for all to see." Others were torn. Another child confessed in an interview, "He was still my dad. Whatever he did, no matter what, part of me will always love him. But I can't turn my back on what I saw today. He made his own decisions. Now he has to live with them." The family was broken, but one thing was for sure. The children no longer had to live with the burden of Kody's dominance. Outside, the media lost their minds. Media outlets splashed headlines across televisions. Kody Brown sentenced 22 years for fraud and deception. From reality star to prison, the downfall of the sister wives patriarch. Meri Brown tells the truth tops Kody in courtroom battle. Social media exploded. Clips of Meri's testimony went viral, with fans calling her a warrior and the voice of justice. Memes flooded Twitter, some mocking Kody's courtroom outbursts, others praising Meri's calm strength. Within hours, the hashtag #KodyBrown sentence trended globally. Millions of people who had once tuned in to Sister Wives were now glued to updates of this very real drama. The public's reaction was divided, but passionate. Some fans, who had long been critical of Kody, rejoiced. "This is karma," one commenter exclaimed. "You can only gaslight and manipulate people for so long before it comes back to haunt you." Others, especially those who had empathized with his story on the show, were shocked. "I can't believe this," one fan posted. "I thought he was misunderstood, not dangerous. This changes everything." Talk shows, podcasts, and YouTube channels dissected the case endlessly. Analysts replayed every word of Meri's statement. Legal experts debated the sentence, and former reality TV stars weighed in on the dangers of mixing fame with family. As the frenzy raged outside, Kody's new reality inside prison was starkly different. Gone were the fancy cars, the big houses, the glare of TLC cameras. In their stead, a cold cell, a plain uniform, and the bare-bones life of a prisoner. For a man who had defined himself completely as being in charge, prison was the ultimate degradation. He was no longer the boss. He was just another inmate. Insider reports showed that Kody floundered right away. He attempted to assert power among prisoners, and they laughed at him. His once impassioned speeches bombed in an environment where nobody cared about past celebrity. For the first time in his life, Kody Brown wasn't the patriarch. He wasn't the star. He was nothing. As Kody adapted to life in prison, Meri quietly started anew. She spoke at a women's empowerment conference just weeks later, where she told her story, not as rumor but as inspiration. Her message was one: silence holds us prisoner. Speaking truth sets us free. Don't let anybody tell you your voice is not important, because it is. Her words came so deeply to women who had experienced controlling or toxic relationships. Meri was not only a reality TV star anymore. She was a symbol of strength. The repercussions of Kody's sentencing extended beyond the family and viewers. It began larger discussions about toxic dynamics, manipulation, and the blurred boundaries between reality TV entertainment and real-world consequences. Experts appeared on news panels discussing how fame can amplify dangerous behavior, how patriarchal control can spiral into abuse, and how voices like Meri's are crucial in breaking cycles of silence. The courtroom climax escalated beyond a scandal. It escalated to a cultural reference point, a time when entertainment and justice intersected, and the world was paying attention. 7 months later, one photograph went viral once more. A courtroom sketch of Kody slumped in his chair, aghast as the verdict was read. His face ashen, his shoulders rolled forward, his authority stripped away. Next to it, a picture of Meri walking out of the courthouse, head held high, a gentle smile of peace on her lips. 2 photos, side by side. A man who built a life on deceit falling, and a woman who based her power on truth rising. It was a tale that would live long after reality television, remembered forever in the public's consciousness, as the day the empire built by Kody Brown finally came crashing down.